My name is Judith Whitfield. I'm 72 years old. And this is the story of how my spoiled grandson broke my heart. Before teaching me that miracles can still happen, let me start by saying that I love my grandson Ethan with every fiber of my being. But loving someone and liking their behavior are two very different things. And for the past 3 years, Ethan has made it increasingly difficult to like him. Ethan is 60 now, the only child of my daughter Rebecca and her husband Mark. From the moment he was born, he was treated like a little prince. Rebecca, who struggled with fertility for years before having Ethan, poured all her love and anxiety into making sure he never wanted for anything. Mark, a successful lawyer who grew up poor, was determined that his son would never experience the hardships he did. The result? A teenager who believes the world owes him everything and gives nothing in return. My husband Harold and I have watched this transformation with growing concern. When Ethan was little, he was sweet and loving. He would run to us with open arms, sit on Harold's lap while he read stories, and help me bake cookies in the kitchen. Those were precious times that I treasure in my heart. But somewhere around age 13, everything changed. It started with small things. Eye rolls when we spoke. Sighs of exasperation when we asked about school. One-word answers to our questions. Rebecca and Mark dismissed it as typical teenage behavior. But Harold and I could see it was more than that. The first real incident happened 2 years ago during Thanksgiving dinner. Harold was telling a story about his time in the Navy, something he'd done countless times before, and Ethan had always listened with fascination. But this time, Ethan looked up from his phone and said, "Grandpa, nobody cares about your boring war stories." The silence at the table was deafening. Harold's face went pale, and I saw the hurt flash in his eyes. Rebecca started to say something, but Mark quickly changed the subject, and the moment passed without consequence. That should have been a wake-up call, but instead, it became the new normal. Over the following months, Ethan's disrespect escalated. He would interrupt us mid-sentence, dismiss our opinions as outdated, and treat us like we were invisible. When we visited, he would barely acknowledge our presence, staying glued to his phone or video games. The worst part was watching Rebecca and Mark enable this behavior. Every time we tried to address it, they had excuses ready. "He's just stressed about school. Teenagers are naturally self-centered. He doesn't mean anything by it. You're being too sensitive." But we weren't being sensitive. We were being disrespected by a child we had loved and supported his entire life. Harold and I had been married for 52 years. We raised 3 children, built a successful business from nothing, and contributed to our community in countless ways. We deserved basic respect, especially from our own family. The financial aspect made it even more painful. Over the years, we had spent thousands of dollars on Ethan. Birthday gifts, Christmas presents, his expensive gaming equipment, clothes, and even a car for his 16th birthday. A brand new Honda Civic that cost us $25,000. We had also set up a college fund for him that now contained over $80,000. But Ethan acted like these were obligations, not gifts. When we gave him the car, his response was, "It's not the color I wanted, but I guess it'll do." No thank you, no appreciation, just criticism. Harold was particularly hurt by Ethan's attitude. My husband had always been close to his grandchildren. Rebecca's older brother David had 2 kids who adored Harold and visited regularly. But Ethan seemed to view his grandfather as an annoyance, someone whose presence he had to tolerate. "I don't understand what we did wrong," Harold would say to me late at night. "I love that boy, but he acts like he hates us. I didn't have an answer. We had always been loving, supportive grandparents. We attended his school events, celebrated his achievements, and were there for him whenever he needed us. But somehow, that wasn't enough. The breaking point came 6 months ago during Ethan's 16th birthday party. Rebecca had organized a big celebration at their house. Expensive catering, a DJ, decorations that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Harold and I arrived early to help set up, as we always did. Ethan was in the living room, with some friends, showing off his new gaming setup, another expensive gift from his parents. When he saw us, he didn't even look up. "Hey, Ethan," I said cheerfully. "Happy birthday, sweetheart." He glanced at me briefly. "Oh, hi." That was it. No hug, no smile, no acknowledgement that we had driven an hour to be there for his special day. Harold tried next. "How's the new game system, buddy?" "It's fine," Ethan replied, still not looking at us. One of his friends, a polite boy named Jake, nudged him. "Dude, aren't you going to introduce us to your grandparents?" Ethan sighed dramatically. "These are my mom's parents, Grandpa Harold and Grandma Judith." The way he said our names, like they left a bad taste in his mouth, was devastating. We weren't beloved grandparents. We were just mom's parents, an obligation he had to acknowledge. Later that evening, after the party was winding down, Harold and I were cleaning up in the kitchen while Rebecca and Mark dealt with the remaining guests. Ethan came in to get something from the refrigerator. "Ethan," I said gently, "we have your gift in the car. Would you like to open it now?" He shrugged. I guess. We had bought him a beautiful leather jacket, something he had mentioned wanting months earlier. It cost $300, which was a significant expense for us on our fixed income, but we wanted to give him something special. He opened the box, looked at the jacket for about 2 seconds, and said, "It's not really my style anymore." My heart broke a little more. "But thank you," he added as an afterthought, clearly prompted by some distant memory of manners. As we drove home that night, Harold was unusually quiet. Finally, he spoke. "Judith, I don't think he loves us anymore." I wanted to argue, to say that of course Ethan loved us. He was just going through a phase. But deep down, I was starting to wonder the same thing. How had we gone from being the grandparents he ran to with excitement to being the people he could barely tolerate in the same room? The months following Ethan's birthday party were a slow descent into heartbreak. Each interaction with our grandson felt like walking on eggshells, never knowing when his next dismissive comment would land like a dagger to our hearts. Harold began to withdraw. My husband, who had always been the life of every family gathering, started making excuses to avoid visits. "I have a doctor's appointment," he'd say, "or the car needs work." But I knew the truth. He couldn't bear to see the indifference in Ethan's eyes anymore. I tried to bridge the gap, calling Rebecca weekly to check in and always asking about Ethan. But even these conversations became painful. "How's Ethan doing in school?" I'd ask. "Oh, you know, typical teenager stuff. He's stressed about his grades. Maybe we could help him with his homework." Harold was always good at math, and I could help with his English essays. "That's sweet, Mom. But he's pretty independent. He doesn't really like help." Independent. That was the word they used to justify his rejection of us. The few times we did see Ethan, the interactions were increasingly cold. During Easter dinner, he spent the entire meal on his phone, responding to our questions with grunts and shrugs. When Harold tried to engage him in conversation about baseball, something they used to bond over, Ethan looked at him with barely concealed annoyance. "Grandpa, I don't really follow baseball anymore. That's kind of an old person thing." An old person thing. As if being interested in sports was somehow beneath him because we enjoyed it too. The comment hit Harold particularly hard. That night, I found him sitting in his chair, staring out the window. "Maybe he's right," he said quietly. "Maybe we are just old people who don't understand the world anymore." "Harold Whitfield," I said firmly, "don't you dare let that boy make you feel small. You're a good man who's lived a full life and has wisdom to share. If he's too foolish to see that, it's his loss." But even as I said the words, I felt my own confidence wavering. The situation reached a new low during Ethan's junior year. His school was having a Grandparents' Day, an event we had attended every year since he started kindergarten. We always looked forward to it, seeing his classroom, meeting his teachers, and watching him present his projects. This year, when I called Rebecca to confirm the date, there was an uncomfortable pause. "Actually, Mom," Ethan asked if you guys could skip it this year. My heart sank. "Skip it? Why?" He says he's embarrassed. Apparently, some of his friends think it's uncool to have grandparents there. Embarrassed? Of us. Rebecca, we've never missed a Grandparents' Day. We've been looking forward to it. "I know, Mom, and I'm sorry, but he's at a difficult age, and I don't want to force him. Maybe next year will be different." I hung up the phone and cried. Harold found me in the kitchen, tears streaming down my face. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" When I told him, his face crumpled. "He's embarrassed of us." That's what Rebecca said. Harold sat down heavily at the kitchen table. "Judith, what did we do wrong? I keep trying to figure it out, but I can't." "We didn't do anything wrong," I said, though I was no longer sure I believed it. The rejection from Grandparents' Day was followed by a series of smaller but equally painful snubs. Ethan's baseball games, which we had attended religiously, were suddenly not a big deal, and we were told not to bother coming. His school play, where he had a small part, was just for immediate family. Even his driver's license celebration, a milestone we had been excited to share, happened without us. We were being systematically excluded from his life. The worst part was watching Rebecca and Mark enable this behavior. Every time we expressed hurt or concern, they had explanations ready. "He's asserting his independence. Teenagers need space from extended family. He's just focused on his friends right now. You're taking this too personally." But how could we not take it personally? This was our grandson, a child we had loved since the day he was born. We had changed his diapers, taught him to ride a bike, cheered at his Little League games, and celebrated every milestone. Now he acted like we were strangers. The breaking point came during Christmas last year. We had spent weeks preparing for the holiday, buying thoughtful gifts and planning special activities. Harold had even learned to play a video game that Ethan enjoyed, thinking it might give them something to bond over. When we arrived at Rebecca's house on Christmas morning, Ethan was already surrounded by open presents. He barely looked up when we walked in. "Merry Christmas, Ethan," I said, trying to inject enthusiasm into my voice. "Yeah, Merry Christmas," he mumbled, not making eye contact. We had bought him a high-end gaming headset that cost us $400, money we really couldn't afford on our fixed income, but we wanted to give him something he would truly appreciate. He opened the box, glanced at the headset, and said, "Oh, Thanks. I already have one. But I guess I can return this. Return it. He was going to return our Christmas gift. Harold's face went white. We can exchange it for something else if you'd prefer. Ethan shrugged. Whatever. It's not a big deal. But it was a big deal. To us. It was everything. Later that day, as we were preparing to leave, I overheard Ethan talking to his cousin David, Rebecca's brother's son, who was visiting from out of state. Dude, your grandparents seem really cool, David was saying. They were asking me about college and actually listening to my answers. Yeah, well, you're lucky, Ethan replied. Mine are just, I don't know. They're kind of annoying. They always want to talk and hang out and stuff. It's like they don't have their own lives. Annoying. We were annoying for wanting to spend time with our grandson. David looked confused. But they seem really nice. And they obviously love you, I guess. But they're just old, you know. They don't understand anything about my life. I stood frozen in the hallway, feeling like I'd been punched in the stomach. Harold appeared beside me. He had heard it too. Let's go home, he whispered. We left without saying goodbye to anyone. That night, Harold and I sat in our living room, surrounded by the Christmas decorations we had put up with such hope and excitement just weeks before. Maybe we should stop trying, Harold said quietly. Maybe we should just accept that he's outgrown us. He's 16 years old, I replied. He hasn't outgrown us. He's been taught that we don't matter. By who? By everyone who makes excuses for his behavior. By parents who think respect is optional. By a society that tells kids they don't owe anyone anything. Harold looked at me with tired eyes. So what do we do? I didn't have an answer. For the first time in my 72 years, I felt truly helpless. Our grandson, the child we had loved unconditionally, had made it clear that we were nothing more than an inconvenience in his life, and the people who should have been teaching him better were too busy enabling his selfishness. To see the damage being done, spring arrived with a phone call that should have filled us with joy. Rebecca was calling to invite us to Ethan's high school graduation ceremony. It's on Saturday, June 15th, at 2 p.m., she said, her voice carrying that forced cheerfulness I had come to recognize whenever Ethan was involved. We'd love for you and Dad to be there. Of course we'll be there, I replied immediately. We wouldn't miss it for the world. There was a pause. Actually, Mom, there's something I need to tell you. Ethan, well, he wasn't thrilled about the invitation. My heart sank. What do you mean? He said he didn't see the point in having you there since you don't really know him anymore. Rebecca's voice was apologetic but firm. But Mark and I insisted. We told him that your family and you deserved to be there. Deserved to be there. As if our presence at our grandson's graduation was some kind of privilege we had to earn rather than a natural expression of family love. Rebecca, we've been to every important event in his life. Why would we miss his graduation? I know, Mom, and I want you there. It's just, please don't take it personally if he seems distant. He's been under a lot of stress with college applications and everything. I hung up the phone feeling a familiar ache in my chest. Harold looked at me expectantly. We're invited to the graduation, I said. But Ethan didn't want us there. Harold's shoulders sagged. Maybe we shouldn't go. Harold Whitfield, that boy, is graduating from high school. We are going to be there whether he likes it or not. But even as I said it, I wondered if we were setting ourselves up for more heartbreak. The weeks leading up to graduation were filled with preparation. I bought a new dress, something cheerful and bright that I hoped would reflect the joy I wanted to feel. Harold got his good suit cleaned and pressed. We planned to take Ethan out for a celebration dinner afterward, assuming he would agree to it. I also spent time putting together a special graduation gift, along with a check for $1,000, money we had saved specifically for this occasion. I created a photo album chronicling Ethan's life from birth to graduation. Every page was carefully arranged with pictures of family moments, school events, and milestones we had shared. I wrote captions for each photo, sharing memories and expressing our love and pride. It took me weeks to complete, and when I finished, I felt proud of what I had created. Surely this would show Ethan how much he meant to us, how we had treasured every moment of watching him grow up. Harold was less optimistic. Judith, I hope you're not setting yourself up for disappointment. It's his graduation, Harold. This is different. This is important. The morning of graduation dawned bright and clear. We dressed carefully, Harold in his navy suit and me in my new blue dress. We arrived at the school early, wanting to get good seats where we could see Ethan clearly. The auditorium was filling up with families, all buzzing with excitement and pride. I watched other grandparents hugging their graduates, taking photos, and beaming with joy. I imagined Ethan running up to us after the ceremony, diploma in hand, finally ready to acknowledge how much we meant to each other. Rebecca and Mark arrived and waved us over to seats they had saved. Ethan's in the third row, Rebecca pointed out. You should be able to see him clearly from here. As the ceremony began, I felt my heart swelling with pride despite everything. There was our grandson, looking handsome in his cap and gown, about to graduate from high school. Whatever our relationship issues, this was a moment to celebrate. When they called Ethan's name, Harold and I stood up and cheered along with Rebecca and Mark. For a brief moment, I caught Ethan's eye as he walked across the stage. Instead of the smile I hoped for, he looked embarrassed and quickly looked away. After the ceremony, families gathered outside for photos and congratulations. We waited patiently as Ethan was surrounded by friends and their families. Finally, Rebecca called him over. Ethan, come take some pictures with Grandma and Grandpa. He approached reluctantly, his expression making it clear this was an obligation rather than a joy. Congratulations, sweetheart, I said, reaching out to hug him. We're so proud of you. He allowed the hug but didn't return it. Thanks, Harold stepped forward with his hand extended. Congratulations, son. This is a big day. Ethan shook his grandfather's hand briefly. Yeah, thanks. We took a few awkward photos. Ethan's smile forced and his body language screaming that he wanted to be anywhere else. Then Rebecca suggested we all go out for the celebration dinner we had planned. Actually, Ethan said, I'm going to hang out with my friends. We have plans, but we made reservations. I said, trying to keep the disappointment out of my voice. We wanted to celebrate with you. I didn't ask you to make reservations, he replied, his tone sharp. I have my own plans. Rebecca intervened. Ethan, your grandparents came here specifically to celebrate with you. The least you can do is have dinner with them. Fine, he said with an exaggerated sigh. But I can't stay long. The dinner was a disaster. Ethan sat at the table like he was being tortured, checking his phone constantly and giving one-word answers to our questions. When I presented him with the photo album and the check, he flipped through the pages quickly without really looking at them. Thanks, he said, setting the album aside. This is nice. Weeks of work, years of memories, and it was nice. Harold tried one more time to connect. Ethan, We know you're growing up and becoming independent, but we want you to know that we're always here for you. We love you, and we're proud of the young man you've become." Ethan looked up from his phone with an expression of barely concealed irritation. "Look, I appreciate that you guys came today and everything, but can we just be honest here?" "Honest about what?" I asked. "About the fact that we don't really have a relationship anymore. I mean, you're nice people and all, but we don't have anything in common. You don't understand my life, and I don't really understand yours. We're just different generations." The words hit me like a physical blow. Harold's face went pale. "Ethan," Rebecca said sharply, "that's enough." "No, Mom, it's fine. I'm just being honest. They keep trying to be involved in my life, but the truth is, I've outgrown the whole grandparent thing. I'm going to college in the fall, and I'll be starting my own life. I don't need to pretend anymore." Pretend. He had been pretending to care about us. "What your grandson is trying to say," Mark interjected, clearly uncomfortable, "is that he's at an age where peer relationships are more important than family relationships. It's normal." "No," I said quietly, standing up from the table. "What our grandson is saying is that we're useless old people who have no place in his life." Ethan didn't deny it. Harold stood up beside me, his hands shaking. "We should go." "Grandma." "Grandpa, wait," Rebecca called after us, but we were already walking away in the parking lot. Harold leaned against our car, breathing heavily. "Harold, are you okay? I need a minute." He was pale and sweating. "Maybe we should go to the hospital." "No, I'm fine. Just heartbroken." We drove home in silence. That night, Harold had his first heart attack. As I sat in the hospital waiting room, listening to the doctors explain that stress could be a contributing factor to cardiac events, I realized that our grandson hadn't just broken our hearts metaphorically. He had literally broken Harold's heart, and he didn't even know it. Harold spent 3 days in the hospital, 3 days of tests, monitors, and worried conversations with doctors about stress management and lifestyle changes, 3 days during which our phone remained conspicuously silent. Rebecca visited once, bringing flowers and apologies. "Mom, I'm so sorry about what happened at dinner." Ethan was completely out of line. "Where is he?" I asked. He's at orientation for college. He left yesterday." "He left. His grandfather is in the hospital, and he left for college orientation." Rebecca looked uncomfortable. "He didn't know it was serious." I told him Grandpa was fine. "Did you tell him that his cruel words might have contributed to the heart attack?" "Mom, that's not fair. You can't blame Ethan for Dad's medical condition." "But I could, and I did." "Not entirely, of course. Harold was 74 years old and had other risk factors, but the timing was too coincidental to ignore. The stress of that awful dinner, the finality of Ethan's rejection, the realization that we had lost our grandson completely. It had all been too much for Harold's heart to bear. When Harold was finally released from the hospital, he was a changed man. The doctors had prescribed medications and lifestyle changes, but the biggest change was in his spirit. The man who had once been vibrant and engaged seemed to have lost his spark. "I keep thinking about what he said," Harold told me one evening as we sat on our porch, "about us not having anything in common, about him outgrowing us. Harold, he's a selfish teenager who doesn't know what he's talking about. But what if he's right? What if we are just useless old people?" "Stop it," I said firmly. "We are not useless. We have lived full lives, raised good children, contributed to our community, and loved that boy unconditionally. If he can't see our value, that's his failing, not ours." But even as I said the words, I felt the doubt creeping in. Maybe we were clinging to a relationship that had naturally run its course. Maybe this was just how families evolved. Children grew up and moved on, leaving their elders behind. Summer passed quietly. Ethan left for college at the University of Michigan without saying goodbye. Rebecca mentioned that he was settling in well and making new friends, but she didn't suggest that we call him or visit. The message was clear. Ethan was starting his new life, and we weren't part of it. Harold's recovery was slow. Physically, he was doing well. His heart was healing, and his medications were working. But emotionally, he seemed to be fading. He stopped working in his garden, something he had always loved. He lost interest in his woodworking projects. He even stopped watching baseball, saying it reminded him too much of trying to connect with Ethan. I feel like I failed him somehow. Harold confided to me one night, like I wasn't the grandfather he needed. "You were a wonderful grandfather," I insisted. "You taught him to throw a ball, helped him with his homework, attended every game and school event. You loved him completely." But it wasn't enough. It should have been enough. Fall arrived, and with it came Ethan's 18th birthday. I debated whether to send a card or gift, ultimately deciding on a simple birthday card with a heartfelt message. I didn't expect a response, and I didn't get one. 2 weeks later, Rebecca called with news that should have been exciting. "Mom, Ethan made the dean's list his first semester. He's doing really well academically." "That's wonderful," I said, though the pride I felt was tinged with sadness. "Are you going to visit him?" "Actually, he's coming home for Thanksgiving, just for a few days." My heart leaped. "Will we see him?" There was a pause. "I don't know, Mom. He's only here for a short time, and he wants to see his high school friends." "Rebecca, it's been 6 months since we've seen him. Harold's been in the hospital. Surely he can spare a few hours for his grandparents." "I'll ask him." But I already knew the answer. Thanksgiving came and went without a word from Ethan. Rebecca posted photos on social media of their family dinner, and I stared at the images of our grandson, looking happy and healthy, and completely unaware that his grandfather was still recovering from a heart attack that his cruelty had helped cause. December brought another blow. Rebecca called to tell us that Ethan wouldn't be coming home for Christmas. He got a job at a ski resort in Colorado. He's going to work through the holidays to earn money for next semester. "A job?" I asked. "But we set up that college fund for him. He has $80,000 available. He wants to be independent. He doesn't want to rely on family money." Independent. There was that word again. What about the money we've already given him? The car, the graduation gift, all the birthday and Christmas presents over the years, Mom. That's different. That was when he was younger. So he'll take our money when it's convenient. But now that he's an adult, he wants to pretend we never helped him. It's not like that. Then what is it like, Rebecca? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like our grandson has decided we're not worth his time or acknowledgement. He's just trying to find himself. He's trying to erase us. That Christmas was the loneliest of our lives. Harold and I sat in our living room, surrounded by decorations that felt hollow and meaningless. We had bought presents for Ethan out of habit, but they sat unwrapped under the tree, a painful reminder of how one-sided our love had become. "Maybe we should stop," Harold said on Christmas morning. "Maybe we should just accept that he's moved on. Maybe we should. I agreed, though the words felt like giving up on everything we had believed about family and love. But then, on New Year's Eve, something happened that changed everything. Rebecca called, and for the first time in months, her voice was shaken. "Mom, I need to tell you something. About Ethan." My heart stopped. "What's wrong? Is he hurt?" "No, he's fine physically. But Mom, he's been lying to us. About everything." "What do you mean?" "The job at the ski resort. It doesn't exist. The dean's list. He made that up." "Mom, Ethan flunked out of college. He's been living in a cheap apartment, working at a fast food restaurant, and lying to everyone about his life." The room spun around me. "What?" His roommate called me. "Ethan's been struggling with depression and anxiety. He's been too proud to ask for help and too ashamed to tell us the truth. He's been pretending everything was fine while his life fell apart." I sank into a chair, my mind reeling. How long has this been going on? Since October. Maybe longer. And he didn't tell us. He didn't ask for help. He was too embarrassed. And Mom, his roommate, said something else. He said Ethan talks about you and Dad all the time. He said Ethan feels terrible about how he treated you, but he doesn't know how to fix it. For the first time in months, I felt a spark of hope. "Where is he now?" "Still in Michigan." "But Mom, he's in bad shape. Financially, emotionally. He needs help." "Then we'll help him." Even after everything he said, everything he did. I looked at Harold, who had been listening to the conversation with growing concern and something else. Something that looked like relief. "Rebecca, he's our grandson. That hasn't changed, no matter what he's said or done. But Mom, he was so cruel to you. To both of you. He was a spoiled teenager who thought he knew everything. Now he's learning that the world isn't as simple as he thought. So what do we do?" I looked at Harold again and saw him nod. "We go get him." The drive to Michigan took 8 hours. Harold wasn't supposed to make long trips so soon after his heart attack, but nothing could have kept him from coming with me. "Are you sure about this?" he asked as we crossed the state line. "What if he doesn't want to see us?" "Then we'll deal with that when it happens," I replied, though my own nerves were frayed. "But Harold, that boy is in trouble. Whatever he's said or done, he's still our grandson." Rebecca had given us Ethan's address, a rundown apartment complex near the university. She had tried calling him to let him know we were coming, but he wasn't answering his phone. "He's probably ashamed," she had said. "He knows we found out about the lies." As we pulled into the parking lot of Ethan's apartment building, I felt my heart sink. The place looked rough. Broken windows, graffiti on the walls, trash scattered around the entrance. This was where our grandson had been living while pretending his life was perfect. We climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor, Harold moving slowly, but determinedly. "Apartment 3B. I knocked on the door. "Ethan?" "It's Grandma Judith and Grandpa Harold." Silence. I knocked again. "Ethan, we know you're in there. We're not leaving until you open this door." Finally, we heard footsteps. The door opened a crack, and I saw Ethan's face, thinner than I remembered, with dark circles under his eyes and several days' worth of stubble. "What are you doing here?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "We came to see you," I said simply. I can't. You shouldn't be here." "Ethan, open the door. We need to talk." He hesitated, then stepped back to let us in. The apartment was tiny and sparse. A mattress on the floor, a small table, a few pieces of mismatched furniture. It smelled like fast food and despair. "This is where you've been living?" Harold asked, his voice gentle but concerned. Ethan nodded, unable to meet our eyes. "It's not much, but it's what I can afford." I looked around the small space and felt my heart break all over again. Not for the conditions. We had lived in worse places when we were young, but for the pride and shame that had kept our grandson from asking for help. "Ethan, sit down," I said. "We need to talk." He perched on the edge of the mattress, looking like he wanted to disappear. "Your mother told us about school," Harold said. "About the job that doesn't exist." Ethan's face crumpled. "I'm sorry. No, I lied. I couldn't tell you that I failed, that I messed everything up." "Why?" I asked. "Why couldn't you tell us?" "Because," he struggled with the words, "because I was so awful to you, both of you. And then when everything started falling apart, I realized I had pushed away the people who actually cared about me." Tears were streaming down his face now. I kept thinking about graduation day, about the things I said, and then Mom told me about Grandpa's heart attack, and I knew it was my fault. Harold moved to sit beside Ethan on the mattress. "Son, my heart attack wasn't your fault." "Yes, it was. I was cruel and selfish, and I hurt you. Both of you. And then when I needed help, I was too ashamed to ask because I knew I didn't deserve it." "Ethan," I said, sitting on his other side, "you're our grandson. You always deserve our help." "No, I don't. I treated you like you were nothing. I acted like you were just annoying old people who didn't matter. I was embarrassed by you, and I made sure you knew it." The pain in his voice was raw and real. I kept telling myself that I was just being independent, that I was growing up and didn't need grandparents anymore. But the truth is, I was just being a spoiled brat who thought the world owed me everything. Harold put his arm around Ethan's shoulders. "We all make mistakes, son. Not like this. Not like what I did to you." Ethan looked at me with red, swollen eyes. "Grandma, you made me that photo album for graduation. Do you know what I did with it?" I shook my head, afraid to hear the answer. "I threw it away. I threw it in the trash because I thought it was stupid and sentimental. But then, when everything started falling apart, I went back to the dumpster and dug it out. It's the only thing I kept when I had to sell everything else." He got up and went to a small box in the corner, pulling out the photo album I had made with so much love. It was dirty and damaged, but he had kept it. "I look at it every night," he whispered, "at all the pictures of us together when I was little, when I was happy and you were happy and we loved each other. And I think about how I destroyed all of that because I thought I was too good for you." Harold was crying now too. "Ethan, you didn't destroy anything. Love doesn't just disappear. But I was so mean to you. I said terrible things. You were a teenager who thought he knew everything," I said. "We've all been there. Not like me. I was worse than just a know-it-all teenager. I was cruel. I made you feel like you didn't matter, like you were just burdens I had to tolerate." "And how do you feel now?" I asked gently. "Like I'm the biggest fool who ever lived. Like I threw away the most important relationships in my life because I was too stupid and selfish to see what I had." He looked at both of us with desperate eyes. "I know I don't deserve it, but is there any way, any chance that you could forgive me? That we could try again?" Harold and I exchanged a look. In that moment, I saw not the cruel teenager who had broken our hearts, But the little boy who used to fall asleep in Harold's lap during story time, Ethan, I said, there's nothing to forgive. You're our grandson, and we love you. That never changed, even when you were at your worst. But I hurt you so badly. Yes, you did. But you were hurting too, weren't you? All that anger and cruelty. It was coming from somewhere. He nodded. I felt like I didn't fit anywhere, like I wasn't good enough for my friends, wasn't smart enough for college, wasn't anything special. And instead of dealing with those feelings, I took them out on the people who loved me most. That's what people do sometimes, Harold said. We hurt the people we know will still be there afterward. But what if you hadn't been there? What if I had pushed you away for good? Then you would have learned a very hard lesson about taking love for granted, I said. But we're here now. The question is, what do we do next? Ethan looked around his dismal apartment, then back at us. I don't know. I've made such a mess of everything. I don't even know where to start. You start by coming home, Harold said simply. Home? With us. Until you figure out what you want to do next. I can't ask you to do that. Not after everything. You're not asking, I said. We're offering. That's what families do. For the first time since we had arrived, Ethan smiled. It was a small, tentative smile, but it was real. Are you sure? We're sure, Harold and I said in unison. And for the first time in over a year, I felt like we had our grandson back. The drive home was quiet, but it was a different kind of quiet than the trip to Michigan. Ethan sat in the back seat, occasionally making small comments about the scenery or asking about Harold's health. It wasn't the easy conversation we used to have, but it was a start. When we pulled into our driveway, Ethan looked at the house with new eyes. I forgot how nice this place is, he said softly. I used to take it for granted. You took a lot of things for granted, I said gently. But that's in the past now. We had prepared the guest room for him, the same room he used to sleep in during childhood visits. When he saw it, his eyes filled with tears again. You kept all my drawings, he said, looking at the artwork he had made as a child that we had framed and hung on the walls. Of course we did, Harold said. We kept everything that mattered to us. That first week was awkward. Ethan was clearly struggling with shame and regret, often apologizing for things that didn't require apologies. He would thank us excessively for simple things like meals or clean towels, as if he couldn't believe we were being kind to him. Ethan, I finally said after he thanked me for the third time, for making breakfast. You don't have to keep apologizing. You're family. This is what families do. But I don't deserve it. Stop saying that. You made mistakes. You've acknowledged them and you're trying to do better. That's all anyone can ask for. Slowly, very slowly, we began to rebuild our relationship. It started with small things. Ethan helping Harold with yard work, joining me in the kitchen while I cooked, watching television together in the evenings. He was different now, quieter, more thoughtful, more aware of other people's feelings. One evening, about 2 weeks after he had come home, Ethan found me in the living room looking through old photo albums. Can I sit with you? He asked. Of course. He settled beside me on the couch, and we looked through pictures together. When we came to photos from his childhood visits, he stopped me. Look how happy we all look, he said. I remember these days. I remember feeling so safe and loved here. You were safe and loved. You still are. I know that now. But for a while, I convinced myself that this was all fake somehow. That you were just being nice to me because you had to be. Why would you think that? He was quiet for a long moment. I think I was scared of how much I loved you. It felt safer to push you away than to risk losing you. But by pushing us away, you did lose us. For a while. I know. It was the stupidest thing I've ever done. We continued looking through the photos, and I could see him processing memories with new understanding. Grandma, can I ask you something? Anything. Why didn't you give up on me? After graduation, after the things I said, why did you still come to get me when I was in trouble? I thought about how to answer. Because love isn't conditional, Ethan. Real love doesn't disappear just because someone behaves badly. It might get hurt. It might get buried under anger and disappointment. But it doesn't disappear. But I was so cruel to you. Yes, you were. And it hurt terribly. But you were also a confused, scared young man who was lashing out at the people he knew would still love him no matter what. How did you know that? How did you know I was scared? Because I've lived long enough to recognize pain when I see it. Your cruelty wasn't coming from a place of strength. It was coming from a place of fear and insecurity. He leaned against my shoulder, something he hadn't done since he was a small child. I'm sorry. Grandma, I'm so sorry for everything. I know you are, sweetheart, and I forgive you. We both do. The real breakthrough came a month later. Ethan had been helping Harold with a woodworking project, a bookshelf for the local library. They had been working together for several days, and I could see their old bond slowly reforming. One evening, I heard them talking in the garage. Grandpa, can I tell you something? Ethan's voice was hesitant. Of course, son. I used to love working on projects with you when I was little. It was my favorite thing about visiting. I remember. You were always so eager to help. But then, when I got older, I started thinking it was boring. Kid stuff. I thought I was too cool for it. That's normal, Ethan. Kids grow up, and their interests change. But it wasn't that my interests changed. I still loved it. I just thought I was supposed to outgrow it. I thought caring about things like this made me uncool. Harold was quiet for a moment. What do you think now? Now I think I was an idiot. This is one of the best parts of my life. Working with my hands, creating something useful, spending time with someone who actually cares about me. I've always cared about you, Ethan, even when you were pushing me away. I know that now. And Grandpa, I want you to know that I never really thought you were boring or uncool. I was trying to be someone I thought I was supposed to be instead of being myself. And who are you, really? I'm your grandson. I'm someone who likes building things and listening to your stories and learning from someone who's lived a full life. I'm someone who was lucky enough to have grandparents who loved me even when I didn't deserve it. I had to wipe away tears as I listened to this conversation. This was the Ethan I remembered. Thoughtful, loving, genuine. He had been there all along, buried under layers of teenage bravado and misguided independence. That night, the three of us sat on the porch together, something we hadn't done in years. Ethan was asking Harold about his time in the Navy, genuinely interested in the stories he had once dismissed as boring. Grandpa, tell me about the time your ship got caught in that storm. Harold's eyes lit up. He had always loved telling that story, but it had been years since anyone had wanted to hear it. As Harold talked, I watched Ethan's face. He was completely engaged, asking questions, laughing at the funny parts, looking concerned during the dramatic moments. This was how it used to be, before everything went wrong. You know, Ethan said when Harold finished the story, I used to love hearing about your adventures. I don't know why I stopped wanting to listen. Because you were growing up and thought you needed to reject everything from your childhood. I said, it's normal. Maybe it's normal, but it was stupid. These stories are amazing. They're part of our family history. They're part of your history too, Harold said. Someday you'll tell them to your children. Ethan smiled. I hope so. And I hope I'll be the kind of grandfather you've been to me. You will be, I said with certainty, because now you understand what really matters. As we sat there in the gathering dusk, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Complete contentment. Our family was healing. Our grandson was finding his way back to us. And more importantly, back to himself. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. Ethan still had to figure out his future, deal with his mistakes, and learn to forgive himself. But for the first time in a long time, I had hope. Love had one. Family had one. And sometimes, that's all that matters. 3 months after Ethan came home, I barely recognized the young man living in our house. The sullen, entitled teenager who had broken our hearts had been replaced by someone thoughtful, helpful, and genuinely caring. Every morning, Ethan would get up early to help Harold with his exercises, part of his cardiac rehabilitation routine. He would make coffee for all of us and ask about our plans for the day. He had gotten a job at a local hardware store, and he genuinely seemed to enjoy it. I like helping people figure out what they need for their projects. He told us one evening, it reminds me of working with Grandpa in the garage. The change wasn't just in his behavior. It was in his entire outlook on life. The boy who had once been embarrassed by our presence now seemed proud to be our grandson. One Saturday, I was grocery shopping when I ran into Mrs. Henderson, our neighbor, Judith. I have to tell you how impressed I am with your grandson, she said. Oh, he helped me carry my groceries last week when I was struggling with the bags. And yesterday, he spent hours fixing my front porch railing without being asked. He wouldn't even let me pay him. I felt a surge of pride. That's very kind of him. He's nothing like most young people these days. You and Harold have raised him well. If only she knew the whole story, I thought. But I was proud of who Ethan was becoming. That evening, I mentioned Mrs. Henderson's comments to Ethan. He looked embarrassed but pleased. She's a nice lady. She reminds me of you, actually. Always trying to take care of everyone else. Is that how you see me? Now I do. Before, I just saw it as you being nosy or interfering. But now I understand that caring about people is a good thing, not something to be annoyed by. These moments of insight were becoming more frequent. Ethan was not just apologizing for his past behavior. He was genuinely understanding why it had been wrong and making conscious efforts to be different. One evening, Harold was telling us about a problem he was having with a neighbor who kept letting his dog run loose in our yard. I don't want to cause trouble, Harold said, but the dog is digging up Grandma's flower beds. Why don't you just talk to him? Ethan suggested. Maybe he doesn't realize it's a problem. I've tried, but he gets defensive. Says I'm just a cranky old man who doesn't like dogs. Ethan's face darkened. He said that to you? It's fine, son. Some people just don't have respect for their elders. No, it's not fine. Ethan stood up. I'll talk to him. Ethan, you don't need to get involved. Yes, I do. You're my grandfather, and no one gets to disrespect you. The next day, I watched from the window as Ethan approached our neighbor. I couldn't hear the conversation, but I could see that it was respectful but firm. Within minutes, the neighbor was nodding and shaking Ethan's hand. "What did you say to him?" Harold asked when Ethan came back inside. "I told him that you were a veteran who deserved respect, and that his dog was damaging property that you and Grandma have worked hard to maintain. I said we weren't trying to be difficult, but we needed him to be a good neighbor." "And he agreed?" "He apologized, said he didn't realize the dog was causing problems and that he'd keep him on a leash from now on." Harold looked amazed. "Just like that. Sometimes people just need someone to explain things clearly and respectfully. You taught me that, actually." "I did? Remember when I was about 10 and I was having trouble with that kid at school? You told me that most conflicts come from misunderstandings, and that the best way to solve them is with honest communication." Harold smiled. "I remember." "I'm surprised you do. I remember a lot of things you taught me. I just forgot to appreciate them for a while." This was the new Ethan, someone who not unlike continue career de historias Viralizu remembered the lessons we had taught him, but was actively applying them in his daily life. The most significant change came when Ethan decided to go back to school, but this time, his approach was completely different. "I want to study education," he announced one evening over dinner. "I want to become a teacher." "A teacher?" I asked, surprised. "What brought this on?" "Working at the hardware store, helping people solve problems, explaining things. I realized I love teaching, and I keep thinking about all the things you and Grandpa taught me over the years. I want to do that for other kids." Harold beamed with pride. "That's a wonderful goal, son, but I want to do it right this time. I want to start at community college, prove that I can handle the work, and then transfer to a 4-year school. No shortcuts, no lies, no pretending." "What about the money?" I asked gently. "College is expensive. I've been saving from my job, and I was hoping—" He looked nervous. "I was hoping maybe I could use some of the college fund you set up for me. I know I don't deserve it after what I did, but I promise I'll take it seriously this time." "Of course you can use it," Harold said immediately. "That's what it's for. But I want to pay back what I wasted the first time. Every penny." "Ethan, that's not necessary." "Yes, it is. I need to take responsibility for my mistakes. I calculated it out. Between the tuition I wasted and the money I spent on stupid things, I owe you about $15,000. I want to pay it back before I use any more of the fund." I looked at this young man who was taking such mature responsibility for his actions, and I felt overwhelmed with pride and love. "If that's what you need to do to feel right about it, then we support you," I said. The transformation wasn't just in big gestures. It was in countless small moments that showed how much Ethan had changed. He would ask about our doctor appointments and remembered to follow up on how they went. He would notice when I was tired and offered to help with dinner. He would sit with Harold in the evenings and genuinely listen to his stories, asking thoughtful questions and showing real interest. One night, I found Ethan in the living room, carefully cleaning and organizing the photo album he had once thrown away. "What are you doing?" I asked, trying to fix this as much as I can. "I can't believe I threw it away. All these memories, all the work you put into it." "It's okay, sweetheart. It's just a book." "No, it's not just a book. It's proof of how much you loved me, even when I didn't deserve it." It's a record of all the good times we had together. I threw it away because I was ashamed of how much I had loved those times. How much I had loved you. He looked up at me with tears in his eyes. I was so afraid of being seen as a little kid who needed his grandparents that I convinced myself I didn't need you at all. But the truth is, I've always needed you. I just forgot how to admit it. And now I'm proud to be your grandson. I'm proud that people see me helping you and Harold. I'm proud to tell people about the things you've taught me and the ways you've supported me. A few weeks later, Ethan asked if he could invite some friends over for dinner. I was nervous. I remembered his high school friends and how he had seemed embarrassed by us around them. But these were different friends, co-workers from the hardware store, mostly older than him, some with families of their own. And Ethan was different with them.